So we'll just give that a second here, whether it's 11 a.m., 2 p.m., or maybe somewhere else in the world. Thanks for joining us. All right, it looks like we are getting connected here. You see people filtering in. Perfect. Welcome, folks, to what I was just told, the first K through 12 school district Ebuilder partner webinar in our history, which I'm super excited about. I did not realize it was our first, and we've got a very special guest joining us today to walk through her school district's implementation of Ebuilder. But before we do, I am going to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items. The first one is, if you look at the bottom right side of your GoToWebinar screen or your control panel, you should see a questions tab. So the format of this webinar is going to be partially conversation with some presentation aid/materials. If you have questions that you want to ask of Charlene throughout the webinar or myself, feel free to drop that in the question bar. We will answer those at the end. We're going to leave about 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. But it's first come, first serve on those Q&A questions. So if you think of it, please submit it when you think of it. We don't always get to all of them, barring time constraints. So that's the first item. Don't forget to do Q&A. I'll remind you a couple of times throughout the webinar. The second one is there will be a recording of this webinar on demand after its completion. On the Ebuilder website, it will be available under the Resource Center on demand. It typically becomes available a few days after the webinar. You'll get a link in your email. So if you need to jump early, no worries, no concerns whatsoever. The final one is you will receive a certificate of completion for this webinar to your email. So if your company or manager requires it, be on the lookout in your email inbox. It should arrive about an hour or two post recording conclusion. So with that said, I don't think I've missed any housekeeping items. It's been a couple weeks since I did a webinar last, but we've got a super special guest today, and we're super excited to jump into this conversation. We've got Charlene Barkholz, and I think I pronounced that correctly. Hopefully I didn't butcher it. She is a construction systems analyst from Osceola School District. So hopefully
Osceola.
Osceola. I knew I was going to butcher it. Osceola. I knew it. I psyched myself out. Charlene, welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we jump in and steer this conversation, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself professionally, how you got to your current role, and what is on deck for you guys as a school district.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I've been with Osceola County Schools for about 9 years, November. I started as a records clerk, just doing filing and tossing paper around. At that time when I first started, we were just starting with Ebuilder, so we had more paper than computer. Then I was a records clerk for a couple of years, and I got promoted to construction systems specialist, which I learned a lot more, doing more Ebuilder, like the background of it, processes, that kind of stuff. And then I was just promoted to construction systems analyst a year ago when my boss, he retired. So I've been, like I said, I've been doing Ebuilder, working with Ebuilder for about 9 years. I pretty much run it, own it here. They call me the Ebuilder guru.
Well, great. Thank you so much. We're going to jump to the next slide here, and we're going to jump right into this conversation. I think the first thing I want to start with is, I know you've been working with Ebuilder for a while now, but what did your school district's capital program project management process look like pre-Ebuilder? What were some of those pains? What were some of those systemic struggles? How did those workflows work? Tell us about how life looked like before Ebuilder.
Well, before Ebuilder, it was always paper, paper, paper. Everything was on paper. We had this stamp that once a document came in, it got stamped, and then it would have like who needs to see this, and then everybody would sign off on it. So with that being said, if somebody was out of the office, that paper sat, or that document sat on somebody's desk until they came back. Copy stains get poured on there. The handwriting was illegible. It was a complete disaster. We had a spreadsheet that was a log, basically. Every document that came in got logged on the spreadsheet, and then it was followed through, and like there was columns for every step of where it needed to go, and then that got filled in, and it was very much a mess. When I first started here, we had just a couple processes. I think we had the inspection request process and I think a plan review process. I'm not positive on that one. So yeah, it was horrible. And then my office was actually the records room. As you can see behind me, we still have some paper files that haven't been uploaded into Ebuilder or shredded. Yeah, it was interesting.
And how long has the school district been operating without a project management system in place?
Oh, probably a long time. Yeah.
I'm curious for you, and this is an off the cuff type of question. What was the tipping point for you, for your organization? I know you joined later in the process, but do you know what the internal tipping point was towards leadership investing and deciding to target a PMIS?
Well, my boss, who I replaced, he is actually the person that put the RFI out on the street. He got that all together, and he pretty much spearheaded trying to get a system. I think he was actually working in technology, so he understood computers, and he understood the need of having a filing system, like electronic document filing system. He understood that papers are getting lost, people are not getting to see what needs to be seen. So he kind of understood that we needed something that would actually be a process, and it would hold people accountable for taking action on what needs to be taken care of. So he pretty much mainstreamed this, and he didn't like paper. I guess that's his biggest thing. So he mostly did contracts. So he knew that contracts had to be written. Getting any changes to the contract, it would take months because that document would have the template would have to go to the lawyer, and then come back, and it just wasn't very efficient. So that was the big thing that it was one of his pet peeves, is inefficiency. So he, inquired about some management systems, and he just took it to his bosses and said, hey, look, I think we should do something like this. And plus, with the upcoming projects, because we were slowly getting busier, with new schools coming in, we had projects that needed to happen at schools. We needed something that was going to keep us all in line and keep us straight as we got busier. So that kind of stuff was what made him say, hey, we need something.
I want to dive in, or double click, to use an analogy, into that inefficiency theme that you mentioned. That's something we hear a lot from prospects and customers. But on a day-to-day basis, just how much time was being wasted? How much time was being wasted in terms of looking for documents, in a storage case, or manually sending over documents to somebody else's desk? Like, what did that pain look like on a daily basis?
Well, when I first started working here, and I was a records clerk, it would take about a week to get a contract completely written and sent off to the vendor to get signed, and then they would have to mail it back. So between a week and a week and a half business days is how long it would take for a contract. Now it only takes us like 3 days. And that's from head to toe to get the contract back, executed, and all that kind of stuff. So depending on what it was, it would be a long time. like I said, 3 days for a contract now is pretty much what we work on. But yeah, it was a lengthy amount of time. And then if somebody wasn't in the office, that would take longer. If they were out on vacation, if they were out sick, those kind of things would also kind of double your time because it was all paper. It wasn't electronic.
I think that paints a really helpful picture of what that manual day-to-day sort of operation looks like pre-Ebuilder. And the reality is there's a lot of school districts, and not even just school districts, but organizations, large capital programs of GCs and large companies that still operate on a paper foundation. So you folks were not unique, I don't think, to those pains. Moving on, let's jump into how your organization uses Ebuilder today. Why don't you dive a little bit into some of the most popular modules that your employees use, as well as functionality?
Okay. The most popular module we use is the processes. Like I said, when I first started here, I think we maybe had a handful of processes, but now we're over 65 processes. Some of them are background processes that are just taking information for logging so we can just pull reports on them. Some processes like our inspection request, we have a plan review. We have a process for purchase orders and contracts. RFIs are in there, ASIs. We have so many processes here that keep us straight on what's going on, and it have a review process for like documents like change orders, contingencies, buyout forms that we require our construction managers to use. We have a process where we can actually review them before they send us the paper copies. So processes is the major process is the major module that we use. Then followed up would be documents, because of course everything that's attached to a process is automatically located in the documents. We have our contracts uploaded into there. We have estimates that we get, all of our meeting minutes at our OAC meeting. The architects are to provide us meeting minutes for design meetings. CMs provide us the OAC meeting minutes. Everything is uploaded into there, and that way we have a record of it. Monthly reports for projects that are over several months, they upload their reports up into the documents. Forms, we kind of use, it's not one of our popular modules. We do have, this is where meeting minutes are uploaded, so it's just a form, they attach it there, and then the documents, of course, are in the documents module. We have a superintendent's daily log, so for projects that are over months time, the superintendent does a daily log, and that's where they tell us about the weather that they're having, if they have any site visitors, any issues that were occurred, and then they give us like a general observation of what happened that day. So forms we do use, but not very heavily. And then the last one that we use is the scheduling module. Our maintenance department has projects in Ebuilder, and they use that module, or they use the schedule to actually pinpoint to where they are. Facilities, which is like the department that I'm in, we actually built a process for our schedules. It's called the milestone. It just has more fields in it. I do know that my boss is now wanting to have, like, for our big projects that we are going to start importing their the CM's project schedule into it using Microsoft Project. So we're going to start using that. I know he wants to in the future start using that, just so that way we can see the whole schedule and make sure that the construction manager is staying on task.
So I've actually got not to cut you off, but I know I told everybody we were going to save Q&A for the end, but we've got 3 really good questions that are directly on topic to this part of the presentation. The first one is an interesting one, and I'm going to repackage this verbiage just a little bit, but Shannon asks, there's a lot of folks in some organizations who have been doing things a specific way for a very long time. And when you introduce a digital system like Ebuilder, there can be pushback, or just any digital system in general. What has that internal adoption process looked like for folks within your organization? And again, I know you haven't been there since the beginning, but has there been a willingness, or have you had to like incentivize folks to use the system? Like, how does that work?
I do the Ebuilder training, and I find that a lot of people who don't use computers give me the most pushback. I guess it's just, I guess like with, because we have architects and construction managers that use Ebuilder, so I guess with them, I guess they kind of are resigned to using it because that's what we require in our contract. So that they really have no choice with. And then I always try to be patient with them. And then, I tell them, call me, 100 times a day. I'll walk you through anything that you need. So I just find that a lot of the pushback is mostly with people who don't use computers. They just are intimidated by them, that kind of thing. So I kind of try to show them easy things, easy ways to do things, and I try to make it as simple as possible with them. But yeah, I mean, there is always that pushback, and people who don't want to use it, people who are used to using paper, handing documents over. So we kind of have to train them. But I mean, I just make sure that they know that they can contact me, and that, no question is a stupid question. And I'm very patient with everybody. So I guess it also helps the way that the training goes. I mean, I've learned some things in my 9 years on how to give, the training for this. So I guess there's not really any way to overcome the pushback. I just kind of deal with it as it comes.
The second question I have for you is, there was and this is from Raphael, there was a review process that you had mentioned earlier that reduced the cycle time from, I think it was like a week and several days to 3 or 4 days. Can you dive a little bit deeper into how that works? And the specific question they're asking is, how do folks become aware that a task is in their court, or that they're the next step in that review process? Are there alerts associated with it? How does that work?
Ebuilder is very good at emailing you every time something's in your court. So if you're an Ebuilder admin, you get like 100 Ebuilder emails all day. So yes, every time a process moves into your court, you get an email, and it says Ebuilder. If it's an action required, it'll tell you action is required. If it's like just for informational purposes, it'll say this is for your FYI, basically. But yes, every time a process goes into your court, then yes, you do get an email, so you are always notified. If your process is set up correctly, you can also create what's called an escalation step, which if the process is in your court more than however long that they set it up. So if they set it up for 3 days, so if the process is in your court longer than 3 days, you'll get another email every day after that. So it does notify you. There's many options that you can use to see what's in your court. And then again, with the emails, I actually don't use the home court on Ebuilder because I have so many processes that sit in my court for a length of time. So I actually built me a shortcut on the processes that I filtered out what I actually need to see. So again, and I'm in Ebuilder all day long. So there's always ways to find out what's in your court, what you need, what you're accountable for.
Thanks for expanding on that. There's a couple more questions that have come in, but we are going to save them to the end because we've got just a little bit more to get through, and I want to honor our 30-minute time commitment here. One of the key, I'm trying to think about how to phrase this. One of the key themes we hear from prospects and customers quite often is that they, or feedback, I think feedback's the right word, is that they love how configurable Ebuilder is.
Yes.
And depending on your team, you can configure Ebuilder to your specific business use case very uniquely. One thing that's really interesting about your organization, and I'm kind of speaking ahead of you right now, is that I know you have different teams that use Ebuilder very differently for different use cases. And that is fascinating to me. So let's dive into that. And why don't you sort of build that narrative for us?
Okay. Like I said before, any project that, like, for example, maintenance is doing or our safety and security department is doing, if that project requires a permit, their project has to be put into Ebuilder. And the reason is because they will use the permit process. Let me back up. They will have to provide a plan review to get their permit. And then we have a process for the actual permit. Then they'll do their inspections during the life of the project. And then once their final inspection has been completed, that permit process that started after the plan review will kick the project into project closeout, which actually closes out the project. So yes, so any department that does projects, oh, I forgot to put technology on there, but our technology department, our safety and security, who do fencing, that kind of thing, and our maintenance department, they all are users of Ebuilder as well. And of course, our building department, they are users because they have to run the inspection request and the plan review process. So yes, we configured our processes and our roles to make sure that everybody is able to use the program itself, that they're not seeing everything, but it's just tailored to exactly what they need to see and what they need to work on. We also have a new project request. This process is for our site administrators. We actually have the process connected to our website. So school site administrators will go onto our website. They navigate to where the new project request process is. They do have to log in. Our webmaster had made it so they have to log in. So it is controlled by our webmaster. So somebody from the public couldn't come in and put in a new project request. But the school administrators would go in and then they would enter in all their information for a project that they need at their school. For example, changing out the flagpole, hanging signs, that kind of thing. And then once they submit that, it actually comes into me, into Ebuilder. So they actually have a part of Ebuilder. Yeah, so those are the people that actually use Ebuilder. So, and then again, we use Ebuilder for minor projects. So like if maintenance needs to install an electrical outlet that came from actually one of the new project requests, that project would be put in there because an electrical, well, depending on the work, the electrical might need to require a permit. If we do have a project in there called our annual facilities permit, so every school has their own permit, so maintenance can work off that unless the work that they're doing is not covered under that annual permit. So then, of course, we would get a new project into Ebuilder for them to do that. And then Ebuilder also uses, we also use Ebuilder for our larger projects. Right now we have 4 K-8 schools that we're building. We have 2 transportation centers. We have a high school that we're getting ready to build. So those projects are all in Ebuilder, and those will accommodate, the project will eventually have, probably over 100 RFIs, probably at least 50 ASIs, of course, depending on the drawings, but so yeah, so the major projects will use more processes and have more documents in it versus a minor project that has maybe 10 documents in it. So yeah, I mean, I love the way Ebuilder is customizable, and then I can build any process in there that we need to. And then if I need to redo that process, I have the control to be able to make changes to it. So I don't have to call the company and say, hey, look, I need this change. So yes, Ebuilder we love Ebuilder. It is such a wide open program that you can modify to how you work. Because I know not all districts work the same, or not all companies work the same. Like my RFI process may be different than your RFI process. So the customizing of Ebuilder is fantastic. I love it.
That's a really, really great cap on this presentation. I've got a couple of questions I want to jump through before we start off. The first one is an interesting one. It's from John. He says, you've got several folks that are involved, I think, in 60 different processes you mentioned. Do those project managers find it overwhelming to be involved in that many processes, / how does Ebuilder help manage and organize their involvement in those processes?
Like I said earlier, some of the processes are just for tracking processes. Like, okay, so for example, we have what's called a forms review process. Now, this is when a construction manager has maybe a change order or they have a contingency. So they will start the forms review process and they'll upload their change order, for example, along with all their documents. And then once they submit it, it goes to the PM for them to review the change order. Once they reviewed it and they approve it, then it goes to the next person. So at the end of that step, when the change order is finally approved and the forms review process closes, it will actually spawn a change order tracking process. So that process just has all the information of the change order that nobody else is in. So it's just basically taking the change order information and creating a log, basically. So that process they're not in. So yes, we may have over 60 processes, but the project managers may only be in 20 of them. So not all processes are for that role, like our project manager role. Not all of our processes are for our construction managers. Again, not all of our processes are for architects, that kind of thing. So yes, we do have a large amount of processes, but again, not every role is included in that process. They can see them should they need to, but they're not a participant in that process.
The final question I've got for you is, I'm sure you're aware that there's many school districts with capital programs around the nation that, rewind 10, 11 years ago, were in the same position you guys were in, but are in today. What advice would you give to those school districts in their capital programs that are looking to implement a similar system to Ebuilder? And I know that's a tough question, but it came up.
I guess if you're getting ready to implement a new program, whether it's Ebuilder or whether it's not, I mean, I would just make sure that it's going to work for you, that all faculties work for you. Again, I like Ebuilder because if something changes, because life changes all the time. So whether it comes down to, we were doing things this way, but now we want to do it this way, Ebuilder allows for that change. So, I mean, I guess that would be my biggest thing, is if you're looking for a program, make sure that you can, it'll adapt to changes in your district, if that makes sense.
Charlene Barkholes, definitely, yes. Of the Osceola.
Very good.
Oh my gosh, I got it on the second time. It just took me 30 minutes to think about it. The Osceola School District. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate your expertise, and I'm glad we got through the Q&A today. Folks, again, like I mentioned earlier, you will receive a certificate of completion in your email for today's webinar, and this webinar will also be available on demand on recording in the Ebuilder Resource Center in just several days. If you'd like to send it to a colleague or a friend, that will be easily accessible. With that said, everybody, thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.